Uffsides NFL podcast. I am Matt Ufford. With me in the SB Nation studios is Will Leitch. He is the contributing editor to New York Magazine, columnist for USA Today's Sports on Earth, the founding editor of Deadspin, and the author of 4 books, most recently Are We Winning?, a memoir about fatherhood in baseball.
I've heard a story about my dad. That makes it sound like it's not completely indulgent, but yes, it's totally a memoir. It's intriguing nonfiction. It's a memoir. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. Thank you for having me.
We go back a bit.
Yes, way back.
I emailed you sometime late in 2005.
Mm-hmm.
I had been reading Gawker.com while stuck at a horrible job in a Manhattan office, and found the tone of that site to be too humorless and snarky, and headed my way over to a sports blog named Deadspin that you had just started, and emailed you and said, like, hey, we're kind of from the same neck of the woods in Southern Illinois. My sister is also an Illini. Mm-hmm. And I think I said, like, I was writing for a Seahawks blog at the time. That was a short-lived little gig. And you responded with a comment invite. And I became a faithful Deadspin commenter.
One of the yes, you and I think there was you and some other and Drew. I think you and Drew were Drew McGarry were the big ones. And I was actually always very proud of the fact because I think when Kissing Susie Colbert started, a lot of it because you guys emailed me, asked to get the email addresses of other commenters that you thought were funny about football. And I'm very proud of myself because I would not give them to you unless I had assurances that everybody else, because I was still pretending like Gawker is locked tight on privacy. They would never ever make any sort of mistake like that. Like that was how, like, if I would have been like, sure, all commenters' names, they would have had no idea. So I was their last stretch of security for them. So
it was good, and it worked out pretty well for everybody involved.
Exactly.
Let's jump into the NFL talk, though, since this is an NFL podcast. This is the most successful and longest running podcast on the internet. I haven't checked that, but I'm pretty sure it's true. So we're talking about the worst of the worst, and fittingly enough, my Seahawks played your Cardinals on Sunday. We don't need to get into the details besides 58-0, 8 turnovers, 2 of which were returned for touchdowns.
I thought you weren't going to get into the details.
These are more the wide swaths, the scores, the details, the brush strokes.
Right.
Now, I think this is fascinating because you actually sat through the entire game.
I did.
I don't think I would have had the patience to do that.
Yeah, that's one of the nice things about pirate feeds. I know I should say that on a podcast for a digital content company, but so I was that's changed my life. I'm now able to watch every second of Arizona Cardinals losses rather than from the comforts of my own home. But yeah, there's a certain kind of I felt like obliged at a certain level. I've been a longtime defender of Wisenhunt just because he took the Arizona Cardinals to the World Series. Look who you're talking to. Took the Arizona Cardinals to the Super Bowl, and that's amazing. Like the fact that the Arizona Cardinals actually went to the Super Bowl, I still actually quite believe that happened at all.
Yeah.
And and up until this year, he'd only had 1 losing season in 5 seasons as a Cardinals coach, which the last 30 years, they had 5 winning seasons in that time, 5 non-losing seasons. So he's been the most successful coach in history, and so it's I guess it's either sad or fitting that his 10 years probably going to end very soon after a 58-0 loss, which might be the actual worst loss in Cardinals franchise history.
It actually is.
Yeah.
It's actually since dating back, I didn't get the exact stats. It's like the 5th worst loss in NFL history.
Yeah, it's great, and that's like a high school number loss. Like 58-0 is not supposed to. I remember because I think it was 73-0 is the big. That's the all-time one. But that seems to have been from they were.
That's another era.
Yeah, they were carrying dead chickens across the goal line, and they were no one was wearing pads, and and it was this whole different time. But so it seems like that's something that could obviously never happen. But there was a chance. I mean, it seemed like Carroll wanted it to happen. But
I mean, it's not like the Seahawks are running up though. The Cardinals just handed him the ball several times.
That bomb on 4th and 22 from the 40, thrown to the end zone on them. Not that I mind. I think that's fine. I think there's people. It's the NFL. I mean, this is not against a Division I AAA team. Theoretically speaking, you should be able to keep scoring and have someone stop you. But certainly, I don't think Wisenhunt was happy about it, but I don't think he gets to be unhappy about that.
I was actually defending Wisenhunt to the other guys in the Kissing Susie Colbert. We have an email thread every day. We still talk to each other all the time. And I was like, you can't pin that on Wisenhunt, like the the Cardinals quarterbacks, Skelton and Lindley, are worse than like the Chiefs quarterback situation. Yeah. Those guys are awful, and you can't pin like the entire loss on him. And he got no compassion whatsoever. They're like, you know. The quarterbacks aren't the ones that made Marshawn Lynch look like Gale Sayers. And
yeah, well, the problem, the quarterback has always been the centerpiece of his problem. Like, they were good when they had Warner, even though he originally wanted Leinart to be the quarterback. He had to have kicking and screaming. He had to have. There was a preseason game that Leinart played, I believe, against the Raiders, where he threw like 5 interceptions in a quarter, and like I didn't think you could get that many possessions, and it was so bad that like even Wiz had to be like, okay, we'll have to put Warner in, and of course Warner electrified the whole thing, turned everything. Brilliant. And when Warner retired, he once again went back to knowing nothing about the quarterback position. And that's what's going to end up doing him in. I feel like, you know, the defenses have actually been pretty good. I feel like the running game, he's never quite got the running game going the way he wanted it to, but he always, you know, it's always been the focus in a lot of ways. And he's just always thought that he can get away with, you know, not that big of a deal at quarterback. And it keeps getting, and for the record, like, you know, Kevin Kolb had his moments this year. He actually had his.
He led the win against the Seahawks.
Exactly,
in early stages of the season.
And it's worth knowing that, like, you know, he's not coming back. Like, the starting quarterback is hurt, and certainly, you know, Skelton has turned out to be horrible, but he wasn't that horrible last year. He won some games for them last year. Quarterback wins, of course, being the best stat to evaluate all quarterbacks.
Definitely advanced metrics.
but he is down to his third string quarterback. Like, but I think that's what's going to do him, because what's happening is now the defense just like they've done the game that really killed them was the Falcons game, the one where the Falcons, I think, turned the ball over 6 times. Arizona took like I think it was 18-19 lead and just dominated everything. And literally, Lindley could not complete a pass to a wide open Larry Fitzgerald in the end zone at the end of the game. And it was so bad that, like, you kind of saw up until then the defense. Remember, this team started 4-0. The defense, like, up until then, the defense had been playing very well and still kind of keeping them in. You saw it kind of break a little bit the week before, and then in the Seattle game, it was clear that they were done.
Yeah, the floodgates open.
And you see that, you know, I mean, that's not something really that unusual when you see an NFL team, but the defense has carried for so long that they just can't do it anymore. And I think it's hard to blame them in a lot of ways. It's hard to blame them. And when you look, I mean, it's not just been Skelton and Lindley and Kopp. Like, Max Hall was the quarterback for a couple of weeks. Like, it's just been so bad that if this is what ends up getting Wisconsin fired, it's hard to say that. It's a pretty big blind spot that he's got.
There have also been running backs who've been injured, and not that your first string, second string running backs are even all that good,
right? But you know, but the third strings on most teams are bad.
Yeah.
So like, if you're down to that, you do have a lot of issues, and you know, Ryan Williams was supposed to be the guy, but he got hurt. Like, there have been a lot of injuries, but 58-0 speaks for itself.
I do want to focus on one thing though. The Cardinals, of course, started 4-0, and they were at the top of the power rankings. I went back on your Twitter timeline. Their last win was September 30th, and went back on your Twitter timeline.
That's cheating. You're never supposed to be able to do that.
Yeah, no, it takes a lot of effort. You've got to do a lot of scrolling.
I thought they evaporated within like 5 minutes of writing them. No,
and
that service sucks.
You're the biggest indication I could see of your happiness about the Cardinals win was a tweet at Cardinals. Great win today. Hugs. Or fantastic win. Hugs. The only problem is that this Cardinals team is the St. Louis Cardinals.
That's true. That was a habit I had for a while.
Pretty excited about the.
It was. You know, they were going to the playoffs. Yeah. Certainly. You know, to be fair, during the Patriots game, which I watched with Jim Cook from Deadspin and Gawker, and
my former neighbor, he used to live 2 doors down.
That's right. And a diehard Patriots fan. We were actually set to have. Because this is the sad thing you do when you're in your mid-30s. You're like, you know what? Let's have a Twitter discussion with each other while we're watching the game at the bar. And then we had a moment where we're like, oh, there's no service here. We can't do it. You know, this is probably for the best. This is probably the best time that we're not going to do this. But so you would have seen a lot of more happy tweets during the game had the bars that have been going actually had service. But that said, no, there's really no excuse.
Let's flip it to the other side of the aisle. Instead of the worst teams or the worst of the NFL, let's talk about the best. Who do you have going to the Super Bowl?
You know, before the year, I actually did have the Falcons. I'm proud to say this seemed to talk about advanced metrics. Those guys, I believe those guys way too much. Like. I always believe them, and they've been big on the Falcons. You know, I mean, generally the way playoff games playoffs tend to go. They've had some really good teams, just haven't been able to get done in the playoffs. So I picked them at the beginning of the year. I'm feeling a little less confident about that with the last couple of weeks, but I usually have to stick with your guys at the beginning of the year. They certainly looked good for a long period of time. I think the Cardinals game was actually when they started to fall off. You started to see the cracks in them a little bit in that game. But certainly, as someone that doesn't necessarily buy into the idea that like, oh well, I don't actually play football. This has become as a shock to everyone listening. But I
also don't. So yes. we should be full disclosure.
Yes.
Will Leitch and I were not high school football stars.
I did play my sophomore year. I was the weakest strong safety in Coles County. I was very proud. But you saw in a lot of ways that you can't really buy the idea that, oh, well, Matt Ryan just chokes in big games. He can't win playoff. Like, he's good. Like, he's a good quarterback. And, like, I know that's, like, the meme, and that's what will keep happening until they actually win.
It's the storyline until, just like Peyton Manning. He can't win the big one. He can't win the big one. Oh, he won the Super Bowl. I guess he can win the big one.
And that's so just, it's sad that that's how we still cover sports that way.
Yeah.
Like, it is kind of sad. But it's also, in its own way, it's kind of irresistible.
It kind of demeans the value of how difficult it is to win. Like, only one team gets to win a championship every year. And the Falcons have lost to teams that went on to the Super Bowl each of the last 3 years.
Yeah,
so.
and it speaks to this fundamental misunderstanding of how athletes work. Like the idea that like an offensive lineman is like, oh, I'm so nervous I can't make this block because
it's a big game.
It's a big game. Like it's always seemed this strange. To get to the level of being a professional athlete requires like just not only just massive focus, but just such devotion in every single possible way. That the idea that I know that this is a bigger game for. I'm always reminded of Manny Ramirez when he said after the Red Sox lost a playoff game to the Indians in 2006 or seven, I think. He said, you know what, if we lose, we'll be fine. Like, I will still be rich and I will still have a really happy life and everything will be okay. And of course, Boston, such a good city to say that in. But like,
they handled a nice measured response.
And on one hand, that's kind of the fan's nightmare in a lot of ways. No one wants to think of their athlete, of their favorite player being like, we want them to be like, we win at all costs or we die trying. But like, that's not how normal. I'm not like that in my job. If we do like a bad job on this podcast, we will go ahead and eat lunch and we'll still be all right. And maybe you're like Letterman and you'll like bash your head against the wall for
I sit in the corner and read YouTube comments and cry to myself.
Yeah, well, that's healthy. But I don't think that athletes really view sports that way, and I think that like and on that side way and on the other way, I don't think they actually go into games like they recognize that this is a big game, but the idea that like they will tense up so much, like they're not shooting free throws when they're down, like that's not happening on every play where everyone is staring at you. Like I always consider that like the most intense of sports kind of stress is to you're down by one. No time left on the clock. You have one free throw, and if you like, that seems to me like the most stressful thing. These guys are just going through like it's hard to remember everything you have to do in a game, let alone like start getting freaked out about this is a playoff game. So I tend to trust the team that has been successful over an extended period of time and not worry about playoff stuff. So I stick with the Falcons.
All right, and what about in the AFC?
I still feel like the Texans. I know we're all supposed to. I'm conservative by nature, and in that I carry around guns with me all the time, and not that kind of conservative, but I guess because there's lots of liberal gun owners. I'm off the topic, perhaps.
Yeah.
But I voted for Obama. Did I say that out loud? Are we gonna? We should talk about that. Where was he born? I still like the Texans in a lot of ways. I always enjoy the Schaub-Aikman comparisons because I kind of like that. What I always enjoyed that about Aikman was that he was good. Like he was exactly what you want, like in a way that like he doesn't work in fantasy, like but like that's kind of who you want. So I always kind of trust him at the tiller, despite whatever happened last night.
He doesn't go out and lose games,
Exactly, which is but he's also not like
not just the Trent Dilfer game manager.
Yeah. But he's also not like Flacco, where it's like he doesn't lose games, but also think he's so badass and make one stupid play, and like Schaub seems to be that kind of platonic ideal of that notion.
I would not disagree with that. Let's move on to the troll bag that get into Will Leitch, the person, your career, etc. Because you have your finger in a lot of internet pots.
A lot of internet pots, yes.
So Bobby Big Wheel plays the troll here, and he says, "Why doesn't Will come back to Deadspin? Hashtag AJ ruined Deadspin. Hashtag Craigs ruined Deadspin a second time."
Yeah.
obviously you're not coming back to Deadspin. You've got bigger and better things going on.
Oh, I don't know if I have bigger and better things going on. I think I'd be terrible at it. I have the way that Deadspin runs now. I mean, the stories that Deadspin does now, I never dreamed that Deadspin would be capable of that type of stuff. I was just trying to make jokes about sports and have fun with it. And not that Deadspin doesn't currently do that, but certainly, the operation that they have is massive. And we were talking before, like, they're so stacked with talent right now. And I was joking. I was having drinks with Lockhart Steele, who is a Curb now, and he was the managing editor of Gawker when I was hired. And we were talking about some of the old days. He's like, "Well, you're the only person that I ever." Once Deadspin started to get bigger, I went to you, and whenever sites would get bigger, I would always go to the others and be like, "Hey, you can hire someone. This is great. You can add on to the staff." And you were the only one that said, "No, I just want it to be mine. I don't want anyone else to do this." And I think that hopefully it spoke to the appeal of Deadspin at the time and why it was probably ultimately limited under my leadership. I think if I would have, my biggest fear, I always talk with Mark Lasanti, who ran Defamer, and he, Defamer's not really around anymore.
Yeah,
and
now he's at Grantland.
Yeah, he's Grantland. He's doing great.
And fantastic
He's
work.
really, really good. He's he is on the Rushmore of sports bloggers. So
yeah,
like Lasanti's the real deal. But I feel like, he kind of regrets in a lot of ways that Defamer isn't going on anymore. And I think part of it is because he stayed on to the point where, like, I left before I killed it, before it turned into Wonket. So nothing against Wonket, which is fine, but like Deadspin had to grow past a certain point that I was ever going to be able to have it be. So if I went back, I would in fact ruin Deadspin.
And the thing is, what people get so worked up about, and I say this as someone who's started and left websites, and people get upset when you leave because they like a voice, they like a certain style, they don't want to see the comment section change. They love a thing the way that it is, and they hate change. And AJ just took a lot of flack just for being different, and he gets a lot of flack for various reasons, but he doesn't get enough credit for who he is and what he does, and that is he's a fearless arsonist, and there are a lot of things that need to be burned down. And
another kind of underrated thing about AJ, he's a really good manager of people, of employees, which is something that I would have been terrible at. And AJ's really good at that. Like, he's kind of changed the entire structure of Gawker Media. They saw what he did with Deadspin, and now kind of all the sites are structured that way, where like Craig's was not. Like, AJ for a while when he was running Deadspin was like the main writer for the site. Mm-hmm. By the end, he was writing the Favre story and like nothing else for the next month. I don't want to know what he was doing when he took the rest of the month off. But I think that like he would set a plan in place and you did actual managerial techniques and has done it so well that they have him at Gawker now, and they actually use them at all the Gawker sites. He's really good at that. He had interest in that. That's something I would have never thought about my longtime friend of 13 years, that he enjoys managing people.
Well, nothing in his personal life would suggest that he's a leader and manager.
He certainly can't manage himself, but he's terrific at it, and I would have never, ever thought that. So I think he's really underrated about that, and I think that's something that Craigs has gotten better at as well. The one thing I miss about Craigs, I wish Craigs wrote more.
Oh my gosh! Yeah, it's anytime he writes something, it's hit a red light and head directly to Deadspin because
it's a thunderbolt. It's a thunderbolt every time.
He's a fantastic writer, and I would like to see more from him as well. Moving on, Dan Rubenstein, my colleague, says, "Ask if Will likes Woody Allen a lot or a lot. I'll hang up and listen."
The sadness of Twitter's having only 140 characters. I can't actually put as many lots on there as I would like to. But the last one was mediocre. I'll grant it was pretty quiet, Woody Allen. But I still think when the guy has his fastball, he's as good as anybody.
Yeah, he does. Obviously, Grierson and Leitch is your with Tim Grierson. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Right. You two review movies together, and I always disagree with you. Not always, almost always disagree with you. But
did you disagree with me on Ted?
I didn't see Ted. Okay. I've actually had a pretty poor movie-going year.
Oh, okay.
But I was actually thinking that I appreciate your consistency because my former roommate Vince Mancini runs Film Drunk. Mm-hmm. And
very well,
a good friend, very funny guy, but like his he'll get hung up on a certain small what I consider to be a small detail of a movie, and then like that's like kind of like it sticks in his craw and it shapes his entire review. So I feel like that he's sometimes like inconsistent. I can't judge if whether he likes a movie, I'll like it or not. Whereas if you hit on something, and you don't like it, I'm like, oh, I'm probably going to enjoy this movie.
Oh, okay. Well, then I'm glad to be a counterintuitive, but a counterfactual, I guess. But I actually kind of like that. That to me, like, I disagree with Roger Ebert so much. Like, he loved Ted. Don't get me started about it. I'm ripping on Ted again on Deadspin today, and but like, I can tell why. I know Ebert. Like, I know him as a critic. I know when I'm going to agree with him and when I'm not going to agree with him. And that's to me, that's what you want. And hopefully that the reviews are entertaining. But it's a side thing. Like, Tim is a lot better. Tim does this as a career. Like, Tim is slumming doing this with me. Like, this is my FDR and his stamp collection. Like, this is my little hobby that I get to do because I get antsy. So, but. I don't think I'm really that. I'm having a lot of fun with it, but let's not pretend like the reason I'm able to have the place is because I started the place and they're indulging me. So like, nice. let's not pretend otherwise. But I certainly have a lot of fun doing it.
Really quick, give me 3 to 5 of your favorite movies of the year.
Well, I can't give away the full list yet.
Of course, I don't want any spoilers.
Of course. But certainly when I sit down next week and start put them together, I think there's a Swedish movie called Oslo August 31st, which I think is actually really great. I actually think The Avengers is great. I think Lincoln is great. There's a lot of them in there. Zero Dark 30, I saw that the other day. That's terrific. I actually saw Django Unchained on Saturday. I don't want to say that the embargo is actually still out there, so I don't want to get in trouble with them.
It's definitely a movie.
It is a movie that has people that are running around, and there are a couple horses. And
I can confirm
the existence of horses
in Django Unchained.
There are horses, and there is Django, and there are chains, and he gets off of them, and that is, I can confirm all of those things. But so there's a lot. There's the nice thing about the end of the year is all the good movies all come at once. So like The Guilt Trip, for example. No, that's the Barbra Streisand Seth Rogen movie. That's not one of them.
No, I will not. Yeah, I did not add that to my to-watch list.
No, probably not a good idea.
Let's go to another tweet. This is from Mark McGowan. He says, "Tell Will he doesn't have to talk so fast. I can still hear him doing deadcasts like the Micro Machines man."
I'm trying to be slower, but I don't like. We were talking about this before. Like, one of the things I like about Matt, among the many things I like about Matt, is like, you have gotten. We all are internet people, and we're writers, and so to get better at stuff like this, like talking and television, we had to really work on it. And I think you were naturally better at it than I was when we started. But you've actually you've gotten pretty good at this, and I. But we talked about, like, one of the things is that you have to be natural. You have to learn to be natural and not think about it. The sad thing is this: I am natural right now. Like, this is actually how I always talk. I always talk really fast. I say like all the time. If you can imagine the tragedy of being me and having to have people that actually have to converse with me on a regular basis, this is actually how I always am.
I think it's a combination of two things. I think the first thing is that you've watched Woody Allen movies all of your for like probably 75% of your life now, 2/3 of it.
Yeah, that's about right.
So he's done what, 70 films?
Yeah, but he's acted in
it feels something like that. So that's a lot of Woody Allen, and so you're going to get some mannerisms for that. I also think you said we're both writers, and as writers, how you talk is a slight reflection of that. And we both prefer writing because it allows you to take that time to choose your words. And where I'm more likely to say or pause and be quiet because I'm an incredibly slow writer, you're an incredibly fast writer. And so you're in this little hallway of communication and you're just checking doors, and like 3 out of 4 are locked. So you go to a door, it's locked, and so and you finish like every 4th sentence that you start.
Yeah, and that's an awesome sentence. That's true. Yeah, that's exactly right. I actually kind of love that analogy of the going to the locked doors. I'm gonna totally use that. But I think that's probably true, and that is how I write. And fortunately, hopefully, I usually find the right door when I'm writing. Not always, but you're right. That's generally how my mind works. And I remember when I was in high school, and the one class I still remember and got anything out of high school was typing. That was the one class that my dad was ecstatic about me taking. And but the one class I got anything out. And I remember I got so good at it that I would hear words and I would start to type them out like in my brain, like, oh, that's left hand, right hand, and spacebar. And I still kind of do that in regular conversation. You can make a general strong argument that. And I imagine most people that hang out with me probably would. I really, really just feel more comfortable typing than really doing anything else.
I'm still there, too. I'm still right there with you. Speaking of things that are hectic and fast-paced and things we can't keep up with, NFL Red Zone, you wrote something about this recently, and I only watch it probably half of my NFL Sundays, and I don't really like how I can't pee for 3 hours or 6 hours.
Right, and it's hard, too, because it's almost taken everything great out of football. Like sometimes I worry that it's killing football because it's everything great about football right there. Like it's hard for me to watch a regular game anymore because I'm like, God, this is so slow. Like there's so much time off. There's they're reviewing another damn play. Well, fortunately, I will see 4 touchdowns in the time that they are reviewing that play. It's football distilled down to just what makes football the most awesome, which is great, but it makes it devoid of context in a lot of ways. And to me, that's as a baseball nerd, that is like context is everything. I feel like that in every sport. So I love watching the red zone. I mean, it's obviously entertaining. It's like compulsively addictive. Like, wow, it is 6:30 already. I have no idea how that just happened. Sort of entertaining, but I wonder whether it's good for me. It's like whippets. It's like you have this incredible kind of high, but you've just killed a bunch of brain cells, and you're currently have banged your head against the wall. But
I have another question about how you interact online. From the very beginning of Deadspin, I was always amazed at your openness as you took flack from the old wave of sports media about revealing things. At the very same time, you had a very public Flickr account that was all the pictures that were taken of you. You had no problem putting them online, and now you have a Tumblr with pictures of your son every week. And how do you have no worries about the openness of online? Are there any fears whatsoever?
I've always kind of figured if I'm just, I tend to not really. I live a pretty boring life, so like I kind of always have. So I tend to not worry too much about. I don't. If I were, say, people that took over for me as editor of Deadspin, I might be a little bit quieter about things in my life. I don't really do anything all that interesting, But it's funny. One of the things every writer kind of has to deal with, the idea of adjusting to people that hate you. Like particularly I like to consider myself a likable person. Being liked is something that actually is important to me. I'd rather it not be, but it is. And pretending otherwise is just lying to myself. So that's a hard thing to kind of adjust to sometimes. But the great thing about doing Deadspin is that I just got that kind of knocked out of me in a lot of ways. That like, okay, listen, as long as I'm open about everything, they can't say that I'm hiding anything. It's the cover up, not the crime, in a lot of ways. And so certainly, the picture of the son pictures are just dumb pictures of him once a week, just like on it's a silly Tumblr.
Cute kid, by the way.
Well, I am full of recessive genes, but I tend to not, I figure if I'm just open about a lot of stuff, and I think a lot of it's true because I used to write the Life as a Loser column, which to me, I wrote this weekly column called Life as a Loser for the Black Table.
Now available in book form.
Yes.
You go to Amazon.com.
Yeah, for like $94 because there's 4 copies in existence.
Man, I should have held on mine. I think I gave mine away to a reader at some point.
Yeah, someone actually bought one time offline, and it was signed to my sister, so that was a nice touch. I'm glad that Jill got some money out of it. But so I wrote that column for a very long time and was very open about everything going on with girls and money and job. And
I was embarrassed for you several times in the book. I was like, I would just be like, no, stop, no, Will, don't do this.
Yeah, and I stopped doing that. And once I finished that column, I wrapped it up, and I realized that was the goal of that column was always just to make me a better writer, not to tell the world of my tales of woe. And so once it ended, I was like, okay, I'm actually kind of done with that part of my life where I'm completely open about everything. So now even though I to maybe to other people, it probably seems quite open. Compared to that, like I'm closed. Like I try to keep my insecurities mostly hid anymore, or I just got rid of them. Right? Yes.
That's clearly what it is.
Yes.
We like to close the show here with a little preview of my Fumbler column that runs on sbnation.com every week. It's a very meme-heavy thing, and somebody named @NotJohnCarter tweeted that Mike Tirico looks like an over-the-hill Ninja Turtle, and I am powerless not to Photoshop that into reality. Yeah. So for those of you who listen to the audio version of this podcast, consider this your incentive to check out the video, or of course the live stream that we do on YouTube.
I'm trying to come up with the adjective for what kind of Hulk he is. The depressing, the slightly bemused Hulk,
the bemused and slightly overweight, depressing Hulk.
But somewhat cheerful, nevertheless cheerful and smooth.
I will say, I really, even if he groped a woman on the hood of a car, I can't prove that he did or didn't. I just hear things. I think he's a great play-by-play guy.
I think he's great. Like he's like the gold standard. He is really as good as it gets.
I think he's fantastic, and I'm one of the few people that I don't really mind John Gruden that much either.
Yeah, I feel like I think everyone agrees it's better since Jaworski left.
Yeah, like they're not competing against each other.
It's definitely better, but nevertheless, just for fun, they should bring Kornheiser and Dennis Miller back. Just so
we remember.
Just for 1 week. Just for like, oh right, Gruden is awesome.
Yeah,
we should do that just for 1 week.
All right, I think that's going to close this episode 5 of Uffsides NFL podcast. If you're not familiar with Will, my God, get on the internets. You can follow him at William F. Leitch. Also at Leitch Writings for a stream of what you're writing for New York Magazine and Sports on Earth. And what else am I forgetting?
I haven't had to try to sell a book in like a year and a half, so I kind of like that. So you can go into Amazon and someone buy one of those $94 copies of Life's a Loser, because I imagine they're all just my dad selling the spare copies from the attic, and he could use the money.
Savvy. All right, Will, thanks for joining us today. We'll see you next Tuesday for another episode of Uffsides. Thanks, and enjoy the games.